Test pilot Leo Sullivan secures himself in the cockpit and eases the throttles forward, coaxing the C5A Galaxy's TF39 turbofans to life. Years of meticulous engineering were required to reach this point. The designers had to create wings capable of carrying 2 battle tanks and 6 helicopters across oceans. Landing gear and structural members were redesigned from the ground up, so this behemoth could support itself. The payoff proved worthwhile, with a wingspan longer than a football field and a profile that looms over the runway like a multi-story building. It stands as the largest airplane the United States has ever produced. The giant gradually builds speed. Sullivan shoves the throttles to full. The engines guzzle roughly 80 gallons of fuel per minute as the aircraft nears the runway's end. Now comes the moment to find out whether the United States can lift 380 pounds of metal into the air. During World War II, while the fighting still raged, Douglas C-47 Skytrains began appearing over battered battlefields. From their broad fuselages poured soldiers, crates of ammunition, medical supplies, and towed gliders, sustaining Allied pockets as Nazi forces pressed in from all directions. In Asia, C-47s climbed over the hump, the hazardous air route across the jagged Himalayas, ferrying desperately needed supplies from India into China's embattled interior to keep resistance against Japan alive. Transport aircraft became so vital to the Allied effort that, even after Hitler's defeat, their continued use in the American inventory was never in doubt. When the Soviet Union tightened a blockade around West Berlin and shut off all land access to squeeze the city into submission, Western forces answered by flying dozens of C-47 Skytrains and later Douglas C-54 Skymasters into the besieged capital, packed with essential goods intended to sustain the isolated population indefinitely. At the height of the Berlin airlift, those planes delivered nearly 13,000 tons of food, fuel, and medicine each day. Children in West Berlin even watched the skies for the arriving nicknaming them Raisin Bombers because, unlike the warplanes that had once rained destruction, these aircraft sometimes dropped candy attached to tiny parachutes over local airfields. The relentless supply flights ultimately broke the Soviet blockade and forced Stalin to relent. In that confrontation, transport aircraft had won an early Cold War victory without firing a single shot. But as years passed, those once revolutionary transports began to show their age. Even apparently modern replacements such as the Douglas C-133 Cargomaster could not remain in service forever. Airframes, suffering fatigue and violent in-flight vibrations, started to endanger crews and cargo. The Air Force moved to the Lockheed C-141, a sleeker, faster jet-powered workhorse. However, its cargo hold was too small to accommodate the next generation of Cold War weaponry. The country needed something dramatically larger. By 1963, a requirement was issued for a next-generation heavy lifter under the CX-LHC program, Cargo Experimental Heavy Logistics Capability. The specifications read like science fiction for the era. The new aircraft had to carry up to 180,000 pounds of cargo, cruise at speeds just below the speed of sound, feature both nose and tail cargo doors, include a cavernous bay 17 feet wide, 13.5 feet high, and 100 feet long, and operate using only 4 engines at a time when most transports used 6. It was a bold engineering challenge. Within a year, 5 aerospace giants stepped up: Boeing, Lockheed, Douglas and Martin Marietta, eager to prove they could build the world's largest and most powerful cargo airplane. As engineers raced to produce designs, a clear pattern emerged. Many of the most promising proposals shared a common silhouette: tall fuselage with the flight deck perched above the cargo hold, allowing vehicles to be driven straight into the aircraft's belly. Under the colossal engineers even proposed forward-swept wings broad enough to bear the enormous stresses of carrying battle tanks, helicopters, radar platforms, and secret Cold War weaponry. To provide propulsion, a parallel contest for engines was launched, drawing the nation's top propulsion firms to design a jet capable of lifting this planned flying warehouse off the ground. General Electric ultimately received the commission and produced the TF39, a power plant that delivered a then record 43,000 pounds of thrust. Using a revolutionary 8-to-1 bypass ratio, when most engines were still near 2-to-1. The TF39 was longer than a typical car and nearly 9 feet across, yet it promised dramatically improved fuel efficiency. With the engine problem solved, the Air Force moved to select an airframe and narrowed the field to 3 finalists: Lockheed, Boeing, and Douglas. Each company was given 1 year to refine its proposal, verify performance projections, and demonstrate production readiness. Boeing's design led early, but when cost estimates were revealed, Lockheed's lower-cost proposal surged ahead. Lockheed's engineers had taken a gamble. They pushed the flight deck forward into the fuselage and adopted a T-tail, an uncommon layout, but one with potential aerodynamic advantages. It might not have matched the Air Force's original image, yet the configuration satisfied all technical requirements. Asterisk, after months of analysis and heated debate, the contract was awarded to Lockheed in 1965. Asterisk designated the C5A. Lockheed's team set out on one of the most ambitious projects in American aerospace history. Asterisk, 2 years of meticulous engineering and complex logistics passed before the completed airplane rolled out of the Marietta, Georgia plant in 1968. Asterisk, measuring 247 feet long and standing 65 feet tall. Longer than many passenger trains, the C5A dwarfed what had come before. To reach the tip of its towering tail, technicians climbed an internal ladder built into the fuselage. At the top, it felt like standing on a 6-story building. Asterisk inside, the Galaxy delivered exactly what the Air Force required, a cargo bay large enough to carry M1 Abrams main battle tanks, Black Hawk helicopters, Bradley fighting vehicles, and fully loaded troops. Asterisk, in addition to full-width cargo doors at both nose and tail, the aircraft used a complex 28-wheel landing gear that could rotate 90 degrees for tight taxiing and hydraulically kneel to lower the fuselage, reducing reliance on ground equipment during loading. Asterisk, above the cargo bay, an upper deck housed a sophisticated flight operations center for up to 6 crew members. Behind the cockpit, Lockheed installed rest quarters, a galley, and bunks to make long-haul missions sustainable, crucial. Because aerial refueling let the C5A remain airborne for extended periods. Asterisk, the upper deck also provided more than 70 additional seats, allowing larger groups of personnel to be transported for disaster relief or heavy combat operations. Asterisk, on June 30, 1968, test pilot Leo Sullivan took the command seat of the first C5A. Engineers had estimated a fully loaded C5A would require roughly 8,000 feet of runway to get airborne. Even then, it wasn't guaranteed the airplane could lift its own weight, let alone combat cargo. Asterisk, once aloft, Sullivan observed worrying performance issues. Excessive drag slowed acceleration, handling diverged from predictions, and the lift coefficients critical for takeoff and climb did not match wind tunnel data. The C5A could fly, but not yet at the performance levels it had been designed to reach. Asterisk, Lockheed continued flight testing, but the early results were far from encouraging. Designers were forced to lower the aircraft's certified payload, but even with reduced loads, forecasts indicated most airframes would develop wing fatigue and cracking well short of their planned service life. For the engineering teams, this was a nightmare. Adding reinforcements would add weight, further degrade the type's already limited speed, and force an aircraft that was burning roughly 80 gallons per minute to consume even more fuel. To address the problem, engineers tested lightweight composite materials, simplified wing componentry to even out load paths, and fitted multi-setting flaps intended to improve aerodynamic behavior across varying flight conditions. Those measures proved insufficient. Structural tests revealed wing failure at about 128% of limit load, short of the U.S. Air Force's required 150% margin for operational clearance. Teams returned to the drawing board, reworked the airframe, and reran simulations, only to find some modified wings performed worse than the originals. The cycle of trials and redesigns sent costs soaring. The C5A became the first U.S. military program to exceed $1 billion in overruns, roughly $8.6 billion in today's dollars. The program's financial calamity became so notorious insiders nicknamed it Fred, shorthand for effing ridiculous economic disaster. Matters worsened when Henry Durham, a Lockheed employee, publicly accused the company of financial misconduct, claiming federal funds had been spent on substandard materials that could not remedy the structural problems. Those allegations sparked political fallout. In 1969, Congress called Lockheed executives to hearings and opened a full investigation into the program's management. Lockheed nonetheless refused to abandon the project and pressed on, gradually reshaping the Galaxy toward the original vision. Aviation historian Robert F. Dorr later described it as one of the worst-run programs in its early years, noting that it slowly and painfully became an almost adequate strategic airlifter that still often required aerial refueling or a ground stop for routine long-range flights, just as Lockheed began to see a possible future for the Galaxy. The company felt the full force of the fiscal disaster it had created. The government, already wary of mounting costs and design faults, could no longer be relied on for unconditional support. Without a quick fix, the future of the C5 and Lockheed itself was at risk. In a bid to stabilize finances, Lockheed proposed a civilian L500 variant to carry up to 1,000 passengers, exploiting the CI-5's enormous fuselage, but the concept proved commercially unviable because it retained the aircraft's voracious fuel consumption. When Pan Am introduced the 747 in 1970, it established the jumbo jet era, featuring a distinctive humpbacked upper deck and a wide, twin-aisle layout that became synonymous with long-haul air travel. Depending on model, a 747 could carry roughly 270 to 460 passengers, non-stop, over oceans with impressive range and economy. Lockheed managed to build only about 250 TriStars before ending production in 1984. By contrast, Boeing produced nearly 1,600 747s by the time its run concluded in 2023. Although Lockheed had lost the military transport contest, it scored a major victory in the commercial market. It would never again field another civilian airliner and eventually had to lean on U.S. government financial support to survive. A bailout officials approved grudgingly to preserve a key defense supplier. That reprieve gave the company one final opportunity to turn the troubled C-5 from an imperfect prototype into a reliable workhorse. By mid-1970, the C-5A was cleared for its first combat deployment, bound for the jungles of Vietnam. After years of testing and vast expenditures, when it touched down on makeshift Southeast Asian strips, loaded with tanks, helicopters, and troops, the Galaxy proved capable of delivering immediate reinforcements to US positions. Under pressure from the Viet Cong, the airplane pushed through monsoon weather and narrow runways, hauling tens of thousands of pounds of equipment into some of the most remote pockets of the combat zone. Still, its arrival could not reverse the larger course of the war. Rather than replicating the decisive impact of World War II transports, the C-5's role soon shifted toward withdrawal and evacuation missions. In April 1975, a C-5A took part in the inaugural Operation Babylift flight to evacuate orphaned South Vietnamese children, lifting off from Clark Air Base in the Philippines and heading away from the collapsing front. While over the South China Sea, a latch on an aft cargo ramp failed and the rear cargo door blew open, causing a violent decompression that shredded control lines, ruined hydraulic systems, and left the jet badly destabilized. Captain Dennis Traynor wrestled the failing airplane manually as it plunged toward the ground at nearly 300 miles per hour, fighting to regain control and attempt to return to Tan Son Nhut for an emergency landing. As the ship descended without reliable elevator control, it struck the ground, briefly bounced, then slammed down again. Traynor executed the only option left and crash-landed while retaining what limited authority he could. Crossing the Saigon River, the C-5 smashed into a rice paddy and broke into 4 large sections, its wings torn away and fuselage mangled. Of the more than 300 people aboard, over half were killed. The accident stands as one of the deadliest involving a U.S. military aircraft. The disaster intensified calls to ground the entire 100-5 fleet. Yet despite that catastrophic loss, the Galaxy had repeatedly demonstrated operational value since entering service, and removing it from the Air Force inventory would have severely weakened America's strategic airlift capability. During the Yom Kippur War, the C-5 played a central role in Operation Nickel Grass, delivering more than 22,000 tons of military supplies directly to Israel and helping stabilize front lines by flying heavy equipment into the edge of an active combat zone. The aircraft's usefulness extended beyond combat. The Air Force's space and missile systems organization experimented with using the Galaxy as an airborne launch platform, loading an 85,000-pound Minuteman ICBM into the cargo bay, releasing it at altitude over the Pacific during classified tests, and observing it drop in freefall before its motors ignited and it climbed again. Briefly, prior to impacting the C.TION, abandoning the L-500, Lockheed shifted to the L-1011 TriStar, a medium to long-range wide-body with 3 aft-mounted Rolls-Royce RB211 engines designed to seat roughly 400 passengers. Smaller than the L-500, but technologically advanced, with modern avionics, sophisticated autopilot systems, and a quiet cabin, the TriStar held promise, but its timing was poor. Meanwhile, Boeing used ideas from its rejected CX-HLS proposals as the basis for a revolutionary new airliner, the Boeing 747. Although the United States never adopted airborne ICBM launches as standard doctrine, the tests proved a vital point. The C-5A could act as a mobile, flexible platform for deploying weapons of staggering destructive potential, bolstering America's strategic deterrent. Once that capability was demonstrated, the Galaxy was quietly folded into even more secret programs. By the late 1970s, C-5 South began hauling crates whose contents were so classified that only a handful of people knew they contained parts that would eventually form the Lockheed F-117 Nighthawk, the first operational stealth fighter that later conducted high-value strike missions in conflicts such as the Gulf War, Afghanistan, and Iraq. As the C-5 accumulated mission successes, initial doubts among Air Force and defense officials eased, and by the turn of the decade, some officials even suggested the Galaxy might serve NASA's needs for ferrying space hardware. NASA, however, preferred Boeing's 747 because its wing design and fuel economy made it a more dependable carrier for the orbiter. Modified 747 to 107 47-100C airframes were selected to carry the prototype Enterprise, and later, the operational shuttle orbiters, between landing and launch sites. Lockheed didn't concede the field easily. In the early 1980s, it offered a space cargo modified version of the C5 that removed part of the upper deck and split the rear cargo doors along the center line, so the airplane could accept outsized payloads too tall for the standard configuration, such as fully integrated satellites and other large space systems. The SEM was also fitted with onboard power hookups to sustain sensitive electronics during transit, making it ideal for moving delicate, mission-critical gear. Although it never piggybacked a shuttle like the 747 did. The SEM became an important logistical asset for classified Department of Defense spacework and for NASA support tasks, ensuring the Galaxy remained relevant for decades. Even after the Air Force chose Boeing's C-17 Globemaster III as its next-generation airlifter, the CI-5's role did not disappear. During the 1980s, amid rising Cold War tensions, defense planners elected to modernize the fleet. Lockheed answered with the C-5B, a substantially upgraded version whose first delivery occurred to Altus Air Force Base in Oklahoma in early 1986. On the outside it resembled the original, the same massive fuselage and high T. Underneath, however, it was thoroughly modernized. The avionics suite gave crews far better situational awareness and easier handling in contested airspace. The TF-39 engines were overhauled for greater reliability, and, most critically, the wings were strengthened using materials and techniques not available 2 decades earlier, dramatically improving resistance to fatigue and extending structural life. Over the following 3 years, 50 C-5Bs entered service. But Lockheed did not stop there. As avionics and flight systems advanced, select airframes were retrofitted with digital glass cockpits, automated flight controls, and improved flight software, bringing the aging design into the digital age and turning it into one of the most capable heavy-lift airplanes in operation. Few other airplanes have matched the Galaxy's combination of size and strategic reach. Notable peers include variants of the Boeing 747 and the Antonov An-225 Mir, the latter, the largest aircraft ever flown before its destruction. A major modernization later paired 50 C-5Bs and 2 C-5Cs with new General Electric CF6 engines that produced about 22% more thrust, enabling quicker climbs, shorter takeoffs, and a maximum cargo capability of roughly 281,000 pounds while consuming less fuel. With those power plants, the Galaxy could depart in just over a mile and touch down in roughly half that distance, opening access to shorter, more rugged runways worldwide. By mid-2018, the last aircraft completed the upgrade program and the era of the C5M Super Galaxy officially began. The Super Galaxy proved its mettle quickly. In a record demonstration, it lifted 176,610 pounds to 41,100 feet in 23 minutes, showing that 6 decades after the type first flew, it remained a dominant heavy-lift platform. The modernized C5 South offer an unfueled range around 5,530 miles. And, like their predecessors, aerial refueling capability lets them remain airborne for extended periods, while not intended as frontline attack aircraft. Super Galaxies are no longer defenseless. After a C-5B was struck by a surface-to-air missile over Iraq, the fleet was equipped with missile defense systems to improve survivability in hostile environments. In total, 131 C-5 South were produced, and today, about 50 Super Galaxies remain in active service with the U.S. Air Force. Despite newer platforms entering the inventory, nothing has completely supplanted the Galaxy, and defense planners currently expect to keep the type operational well into the 2030s and possibly until around